Welcome to the January 27, 2019 edition of the Bible Forum. I am Warren Sprouse, your host, your guide, the person you turn to when you have a question. I got answers if you ask the right kinds of questions. Lots of things happening in the world today here among our politicians and others. Earlier this month, we learned that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to President Trump writing, "I am writing to inform you the House of Representatives will not consider a concurrent resolution authorizing the President's State of the Union address in the House chamber until government has opened. I look forward to welcoming you to the House on a mutually agreeable date for this address when government has opened." And then you watched, as I did, the back and forth for several days. I'm coming anyway. Next thing was, well, I'll do it somewhere else. Later, I'll do it at the border. Later, it was, I'll do it in the Senate chamber, but I'll do it with or without your permission. Well, according to Nancy Pelosi, the issue was security. Given the furloughs of government employees, she couldn't guarantee the president's safety. And then the Secret Service popped up and said, we don't have a problem. Then it was the constitutional issue, and the beat went on. Trump playing with Pelosi, the left taking him seriously and suggesting he was out of touch with the Constitution. Did you know that the State of the Union address was originally a report? It is constitutionally required from the president every year. But did you know that for the first 50 or 70 years it was a written report? It was just sent over in handwritten or whatever. Today the president has agreed to a postponement until the furlough is lifted. Congress, specifically the Senate, is at work trying to get some sort of agreement with Democrats on a partial lifting of the furlough in return for some wall spending. Democrats are more concerned with how this would impact the multitude of strangers and the other 8,000 that are said to now be coming, a new group, than they are about their own citizens, because they continue to refuse to agree to anything that resembles a wall. But then this week happened. The House rejected a GOP measure to pay furloughed workers but keep the government closed. It was a 222 to 195 vote because they just care so much about people. This, again, just not the citizens of this country. 6 Democrats voted for the GOP measure offered as an alternative to a Democrat bill to reopen the government. On the other side, the Democrat bill, which would have funded the government through February 28, is expected to be approved in the House, but is dead on arrival in the Senate. A vote on that measure was postponed until next week. Then late in this week, both sides agreed to a continuing resolution which provides appropriations through February 15th, 2019. With enactment of this continuing resolution, the lapse in appropriations has ended and all furloughed federal employees are required to return to work on their next regularly scheduled work day. So the question becomes, what did we gain? Trump played with these people. They didn't budge. And most people in the country thought it was unkind, unnecessary that government workers, all 800 of them, 800,000. I forgot now. I think it's 800,000. All of them would be out there for 2 months and not have any money. It's not fair. It's not right. And of course it's not. In other news, we have the indications that our republic is crumbling. Actually, it seems to be crumbling from within. NBC TV ran a video from an interview with a multimillionaire who was actually the head of, I forgot what agency it is of the government. And he was being asked about financial things when the host asked him about furloughed government workers showing up at shelters looking for food. This man, who appeared to be in his 80s, didn't understand why this would be at all necessary. And the host was surprised. Given that he was in his 80s, the culture divide was dramatic. Older people understand the need to prepare for these sorts of things. Young people don't get that. And so they've run his interview, and I think one of the late night comedy shows actually did a parody of it to show him and to show us just how out of touch this man is. But older people know how to handle these kinds of things. The kids today don't get it. They don't know that on a routine basis they need to be setting money aside for emergencies. And if you work for the federal government, you set money aside for this kind of emergency, don't you? It happens every 10 years or so. But something around the, I should say, the 20, the 30, the 40, and even the 50-year-olds, that just, it's not in their DNA to consider such things. And I ask myself, why? And I know that generally speaking, humanity is spread out all over the place, and there's just some people who don't do it. But I do know that this particular generation, our millennials and whatever the next group is being called, they are victimized by the fact that parenting went away in the 1970s. As a consequence, children grew up without mom in the house. Television, public school teachers became the mentors for this generation. And then economics became assumed in the 1990s. Children of the 70s were now parents and didn't have the economic skills. And since everything simply came to them, they assumed that would continue. And the third issue was that character became unnecessary somewhere in the late 20th century. And here in the 21st century, it isn't even discussed. Simple values like honesty, integrity, reliability, industriousness, things like that are just gone. The culture adopted a laissez-faire philosophy in every area of life. So today's young adults are swimming in the deep end of the cultural pool without the knowledge nor the ability to swim. They are easily influenced. They are easily led. You can tell them almost anything, and if it happens on a game show or a comedy show, especially late night, it must be true. And the idea of planning for the future is a totally foreign concept. That's what we have the government for. Sticking with a job you don't like until you find a better one? They don't think like that. Sticking with the mate you married and promised to love and to honor until death do us part. The mate you had children with. It's not important anymore. And saving money for the future? Why would we do that? Making sure you have adequate health insurance? Well, yeah, as long as my employer is paying for it, or the government's just giving it to me. Buying a home, creating wealth. Well, maybe later. Maybe. Depression-era children did all these things and more. My parents grew up in the Depression, born in the 1921-22. Baby boomers knew these things were important. They were grandchildren of the Depression people, but it wasn't as important as the things that were happening now. And their children and grandchildren have no knowledge at all of such things. nor do they have any interest. If you work for the federal government, you would know these furloughs can and do happen. You would save money for when that does. No? Well, not today. And that's because someone or something is always there to take care of me. They always have, and certainly they always will. Can't wait to see what their grandchildren are going to be like. Can you? The reality is that character matters in every area of life. You don't develop character, you don't develop it in your children. You and they will pay the price. And you'll be staring at the wall saying, what happened? What happened? Well, I don't understand. Yeah. We learned last Tuesday, on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade, that New York Governor Andrew Cuomo signed into bill a law that goes far beyond Roe v. Wade. And then he bragged that he got it well within the time frame he promised when he was running for re-election. This is a law that makes abortion a fundamental right up to the day of birth. It flaunts all the limitations on abortion that the Supreme Court has permitted. They only say to the first trimester. They used to say what New York is saying, but they backed off. It's a crazy place to be. It was destructive. And Governor Cuomo is a Roman Catholic. Gotta wonder. The follow-up is that Catholic priests are now calling for Cuomo's excommunication. This ought to be interesting. Look around on the website here for the video on how the Roman Catholic Church has changed. We're going to talk about that. A poll was taken recently asking Americans if they liked the idea of Medicare for all, and the results were predictable. 71% said, I like it. 29% said, no, I don't care for it. I'm guessing the 29% are 75 years old or older. But then these youngsters found out how much it would cost. And in the next poll, they were given that information, asked the exact same question, and voila, it changed. Only 26% were in favor of it when they found out how much it was going to cost the government to do this. And 37% still said, yeah, I'd like to have it. The difference? They were told their taxes would go up and that waiting times would increase. Duh. Can you not say Great Britain? European Union? They got it. It's chaos. They pay for their own. They can't afford to wait. They'll die. And then we saw what happened on Martin Luther King Day at the Lincoln Monument. You've seen it on television. That's all we talk about, seems like. Apparently some teenagers from Covington Catholic High School in Kentucky traveled all the way to the Capitol to commemorate those memorable events as huge crowds gathered to hear what King had to say. And while they were there, they were confronted. Oh, no. What was it? No, they confronted people who were there to demonstrate against whatever it was that particular week. And as they were confronting these people, a Native American man by the name of Nathan Phillips, a leader in the Lakota People's Law Project, quietly banging his drum in prayer, was suddenly surrounded and mocked by this group of Catholic high school students wearing MAGA hats. You remember that, don't you? That story? Oh, wait. That didn't actually happen. Yeah, but I saw it on television. And the news anchor insisted this was a blatant confrontation by Christian school kids seeking to intimidate this poor indigenous person. Well, like virtually all such stories, the Duke lacrosse team, the UVA rape, the Trayvon Martin, the Michael Brown story, all these were perceived as a violation of the left's totems by white men. Of course, without this spin, no story about teens doing anything short of murder would have made the national news. But then came the MAGA hats these teenagers were wearing. Now that's news. The liberal media painted the picture according to their own opinions. But the story changed the very next day when someone actually looked at the facts. Pesky little things, facts. In the course of this story, much was made of Phillips' Marine Corps service during the Vietnam conflict. But then even these facts were revealed to be exaggerated and somewhat falsified. Seems the mainstream media just can't catch a break. Maybe they're working too hard at creating their own story. And then there were a few people in America who rose up this week to say they do not like Chick-fil-A food. Not too many of them. Some of them don't like it. But now there's a growing number of people who hate Chick-fil-A as a company. And they do that because of Chick-fil-A's bigoted policies. The case in point, an environmental group with Democrat socialist ties called Athens Earth Strike is calling on the University of Georgia to ban Chick-fil-A from campus. They're calling it an industrial, white supremacist, imperialist, capitalist cult. Why? Well, because they use non-compostable packaging and unsustainably sourced poultry. They accuse the capitalist cults of Chick-fil-A and the Georgia poultry farms for exemplifying violence. You know they have to kill these chickens, right? The factories are built in low-income communities of color. They don't worry about the chickens. They're worried about the fact that the factories are built in low-income communities of color and that the jobs are demoralizing, difficult, and pollute the environment around them, leaving communities in even worse living conditions. And apparently only Chick-fil-A does this. It's not an industry-wide event. If they get their fried chicken and chicken nuggets from someplace else, those people are fine. It's just Chick-fil-A. What is that? Oh, wait a minute. Chick-fil-A is overtly Christian in philosophy and even in their hours of store hours. They're not open on Sundays. Amazing, isn't it? But then in all of this milieu of chaos comes California. California is never going to be outdone when it comes to leftist liberal leanings. And we learned this week that the California State Senate Committee wants to ban pronouns. The pronouns he and the pronoun she. According to Spiked Online editor Brendan O'Neill, who related to the Daily Caller a report on the committee's work, he says it's an example of political correctness running amok. He appeared on Fox and Friends saying it's crazy. It really shows just how far the politically correct lobby are willing to go in terms of policing language. They now want to control not just hateful language and racist language, which we all agree is a bad thing, but everyday speech like he and she. They want to dig down so low into how we speak and ultimately how we think that they're willing to ban the most common words in the English language to suit their own philosophy. Well, who's doing that? Oh, it's the Senate Judiciary Committee, headed by Democrat Senator Hannah Beth Jackson. She claimed the report said, "We are now a state recognizing the binary designation as a gender. We are using the phrase they." Yeah, I didn't know they was a phrase either. Excuse me. And replacing other designations so that it's a gender neutral designation of they. And there's a sentence that makes no sense. But in the liberal left, you don't have to make sense. You just have to have a policy and a passion for anything normal. She said, "We are using what my grammar teacher would have had a heart attack over. We are using the phrase they." And Jackson was then cut off by others who went on to correct what she was saying. She ran into Muckville. She didn't even know what she just said or how all this came about. She couldn't put it together. This is the liberal left at work, folks. They don't need reason, they don't need rhyme, and they certainly don't need grammar.